Not it is legal is subject to taxation. The impact of activities within the illicit economy is a real threat to the country, and its impact is huge. The illicit economy refers to economic activities which operate outside of the rules and regulations of the country, including organized crime. Now, according to the South African Revenue Service, the country is losing a large portion of its GDP every year to the illicit economy. This has mainly been in the form of smuggling of tobacco products, counterfeit textiles, drug manufacturing, smuggling, illicit mining of gold and diamonds, ivory, the poaching of endangered species like abalone and rhino. So how can the Revenue Service stem that tide? Professor Keith Engel is the Chief Executive of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals. Good evening to you, and thank you for talking to us this evening. I suppose the first question to ask you is, how does the illicit economy hurt the development of a country?
Well, I guess the bottom line is when you're outside the formal economy, you're not paying any tax, right? So that's the first part of it. They're usually violating a lot of other laws as well. So usually,
but it seems a contradiction that, whether or not the activity is legal, it must be taxed.
Well, that's the point. I mean, look, the first rule you learn in tax when you're in law school, and I was a lawyer, is that income is income. You don't want to say that illegal income is untaxed, legal is taxed, right? Otherwise, you give it an incentive. So income is income, and you should be taxed everywhere. So tax is only part of the problem. It's usually in the legality as well.
So how does the fiscus lose out?
Well, the fiscus is losing out a big portion of economic activity. We're supposed to be, the purpose of the income tax is to tax net enrichment to wealth, annual enrichment to wealth. So if you're getting richer, you should pay your share because you're getting the benefit of society. So here, you're getting your share, but you're not sharing your share, right? So whether you're legal or not. Now, if you're a legal person, you're running a legal activity, and you don't pay tax, that's a problem. Usually when you're illegal, you're just completely illegal. So it's just part of that, it's an extension of that.
So if I look at, for example, what the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa says, it says, for example, illicit trade in tobacco places between 8,000 and 10,000 jobs at risk.
Well, yeah, see, one of the things that's going on in the tobacco industry is when the regulated industry is doing the rules and regulations and following through, the illegal side is doing whatever they want. And one of the benefits of whatever they want is not paying their tax. And what we've seen over the last number of years is that the illegal side has grown significantly. Now, originally, a lot of it was in Zimbabwe. It seems now there's a lot of mid-sized manufacturers who are not paying their tax at all. They're just illegally smuggling the tobacco around. So you're not getting the regulation, you're not getting your excise taxes, you're not getting your income taxes, and they're basically keeping two sets of books. They've got one set or one thing that they'll show the Revenue Service, and then their real activity is shown somewhere else. And that makes it very difficult for a lot of the international companies because they're being undercut in price.
I mean, if you think of what we've been hearing at the Nugent Commission, for example, I mean, it brings into question all of the decisions that were made under Tom Moyane, at least from what we've been hearing. And for SARS to try and recoup some of these monies, they're going to have to roll back and bring back some of that institutional mechanisms they originally had to deal with this kind of thing.
Yes, and they were even struggling before, but they do. I mean, it seems very clear that the attack on the illegal tobacco industry was quite firm. They basically eliminated the whole enforcement unit. That's what you've seen, and that's been pretty consistent throughout. Now, a lot of people said it was small, but Cecil Morton, when he was on the commission, showed that there was a lot of revenue being lost on excise taxes in there, which also included income taxes. So the unit is decimated. Now you have to rebuild it. Now, you can get some of the old players back, but you really have to rebuild the institution. And frankly, this has always been a very difficult area for SARS. One of the problems is, and for all revenue services around the world, as well as SARS, is going after the illicit economy. And that illicit economy is basically something that's legal that's just not operating in regulated channels. Cigarettes is most obvious, but there's a lot of mid-sized businesses that are operating outside the tax net as well. And the problem with revenue services is they'll look over forms they get, but they don't know how to go out and find out information not being given to them. The only way they get it is by asking and demanding it through the courts. But if you take a look at the Rogue Unit book, for example, if you're going to find out about wholly illegal activities, you've got to do basically forensic audits, and you have to have investigative audits, which is really a semi-police activity. And this has always been a problem for the Revenue Service, but at least they had some form of unit there before. So, now they don't have anything.
So having lost all of those skills, because obviously not everybody who was part of those units stayed within the Revenue Service, so you've lost institutional memory. I mean, bringing them back, it's not a simple case of, you know, hiring office space and saying we've got the units back. It's easier said than done.
You're right. I mean, one, it's getting some of the old guys back. A lot of them, though, once they're gone, it's hard to bring them all back. You're going to get only some. You really have to go to having a big talent search, and you're going to have to make sure you get it from the right pool. And the right pool is, and that's where they were drawing it from before, is more on the police kind of activity. You really need detectives in that space. And again, you'll see inside firms forensic auditors. So you need to go bring a lot of them back. You might need some international advice and support. Then you have to have a structure for it. And then you've got to make sure you have an organization. It's not enough just to have a bunch of good people. You need an organization that can deal with that.
So how much damage do you think was really done to SARS in the last, at least under Tom Moyane's leadership?
Well, in this period, I think very clearly in this space, it became part of a political narrative. So whether you believe in that political narrative or not, that unit has basically been disbanded. So now you have to start from scratch. And to be honest with you, South Africa's not good at this space. If you take a look, it's part of the implementation issue. You can write as many laws as you want against illegal people, but at the end of the day, you have to have people who can do something.
So it's easy enough to blame the tenure of Tom Moyane, but I mean, we understood certainly as lay people that SARS was an exemplary institution within government. You're saying that our capacity was never really even as good as we thought it was?
In that area, I think we've always been weak. I'm not saying that they didn't try and there was some good movements, but there we never really put enough resources. And it's a common problem with revenue services around the world.
Right, the finance minister yesterday, you could say, was stating the obvious in saying that SARS does need to restore its credibility.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, I think there's another narrative. Now, I think the key thing is you see a war of narratives, right? We've had Moyane's war of narratives. Now Moyane's faction is lost. So now you have another narrative going on. But there has been a lot of friction in the Revenue Service over the period of time. And that friction was coming through quite clearly. So one, it was very clear that there were two SARSs at war with each other. And a lot of people were lost in that. Second thing is, there's been a real problem from a practitioner point of view that people felt they were being dealt with unfairly. And there was also major pressure on revenues because of the economy. So all of these things have come out and their credibility has been damaged. And their credibility has also been damaged by government itself. The first damage happened before any of this happened in 2014. What really happened beforehand was government was perceived as corrupt. Because you're not going to pay your taxes if it's for somebody else. That's
which brings us to the next question, because it's not only just about the illicit economy, but there are problems with non-compliance, whether it's VAT, whether it's income tax. I mean, and now, of course, we're hearing that there's going to be tougher action against defaulters, not just penalties, but they're considering other forms of prosecuting defaulters.
Yeah, see, the thing that I do worry about is that people are pushing for more legal means to prosecute. I think it's very important you prosecute the right people and you get the right information.
Now, could we see some kind of tax revolt in this country?
Well, some people said we had. A lot of people say it's on the toll route. I think Davi Root wrote that he said you're seeing it already, that people are playing two sets of books. They're more willing, and a number of people have said this, they're more willing to have two sets of books. They're more willing to recharacterize certain things than they once were. Now, why are they willing to do this? Well, one, maybe because they're angry. You do see some of that. You also see a question of, well, can the Revenue Service really catch me? If I relabel some things, do they have the ability not to just look at my papers, but look past my papers and find it? So now there's a feeling, well, maybe SARS can't do that much. They can get what they see, but if I don't show it to them, what are they going to do? So you do have there is an element, and again, I think Cecil Morton in the inquiry quite showed that the buoyancy dropped. It wasn't just the economy, it was something more, and I think that was quite damning, actually.
And so I suppose it goes all the way to the top if we talk about a tax morality and people doing it simply because it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much. Professor Engel, of course, is from the South African Institute of Tax Professionals.